But this study looked at vitamin C and vitamin E. And you kind of got into it. Why those two supplements in particular?
So in looking at oxidative stress, it's essentially just characterized by an imbalance between the reactive oxygen species and biological antioxidants. And so that mismatch, like we said, can potentially lend itself to the development of endometriosis. And so that's why there are certain diets that are recommended in individuals who might be experiencing this, those that are high in antioxidants, fruits and vegetables, particularly citrus fruits. They're higher in antioxidants, and so they maybe noticed or saw that this had an impact on symptoms. And so taking this one step further by treating people with dietary supplements, not just the amounts of these that are found in foods, by treating or starting something like a vitamin C tablet or powder, or starting something like vitamin E capsules or vitamin D in this case, they kind of took that one step further.
Sure.
So,
okay. So am I right in thinking that, and no is a correct answer potentially, that part of this is because inflammation in and of itself isn't bad. When there's tissue damage, then it becomes inflamed because the body is trying to heal that, and that's the excess. Is it cytokines that are there? But that what happens is when that doesn't shut down, it just keeps going for whatever reason, like a closed loop. That's when it becomes a damaging inflammation.
Yes.
Okay. And these antioxidants help to kind of reset that process.
So they looked at, and that this will kind of help maybe answer the question or answer the direction that you're going. Not only did they see these reductions in symptoms that we'll talk a little more about, but they actually looked at these markers of oxidative stress. So they wanted to kind of look at the level at the cellular level, at the level of the tissue, to see what was happening or in the plasma. And so one marker in particular, it's called plasma MDA.
Okay.
The concentration of this was decreased in patients who were suspected to have endometriosis. And after antioxidant treatment of some combination of E and C, they noticed a marked reduction in this.
Okay.
And it coincided again with the reduction in symptoms. So is this a 100% thing occurring? Right. Obviously not, because we just talked about 8 different potential causes and sources of this issue.
Sure.
But certainly in this case, it sounds like it's walks like a duck, talks like a duck.
Duck talking.
It's a duck.
Okay. So you mentioned the symptom reduction. What were the results? Because they looked at 12 different studies, you said?
So it ended up being 13 randomized controlled trials involving 589 patients.
Okay.
And 11 of them evaluated the effects that the supplements had on pain. So it's about 11.
Okay.
So they weren't the biggest studies, and this was one of the drawbacks.
Always.
You're talking like 30, 40, 50 people, 20 people per paper. But nonetheless, a lot of the results pointed in a similar direction. Yeah. And so the outcomes in this case, primary outcomes, they looked at the relationship between the vitamin supplementation and the endometrius related chronic pain specifically. And so in this case, they had vitamin E and vitamin C as the experimental groups. And then they also had vitamin E being used with oral contraceptives.
Okay.
Now, for the most part, the E and the C groups in this case, they did reduce the symptoms on a pain scale, looking at one of the validated pain scales. The one that didn't work very well in this case, or at least not statistically significant, was vitamin D.
Okay.
And so for the most part, that's the common theme here is C and E had the most kind of bang for their buck, whereas 50,000 units of D didn't seem to move the needle quite as much.
Which of course is not to say that D is not useful. It's just for this particular end goal that they were looking for. Yeah. It didn't do what they wanted it to do.
Yeah. There were some inconsistencies with respect to vitamin D.
Okay.
In this case. So in general, like I said, in general, you're going to see more of the more of the profound benefit in these studies from C and E.
Okay.
And also another one of the limitations, they weren't quite able to control for different diets either. And then also you're talking about, an individual using vitamin E and one of the oral contraceptives, how much of the impact was one versus the other. I know they try to control for a lot of that, but it's at least worth mentioning. And, we'll not to get ahead of, some of the primary outcomes, but in general, it seems as though they're recommending this by itself, or these could be used by themselves at maybe similar dosing ranges to what's found in the papers, or it doesn't really seem like there were many issues using this in tandem with a, oral contraceptive, so to speak.
So of course not. Yeah, that makes sense.
So there are maybe a handful of use cases for these.
Fantastic.
The other outcome that they looked at were endometriosis related dysmenorrhea. So we mentioned the chronic pelvic pain. Now we're talking about dysmenorrhea as well. And so that's these sort of unpleasant issues with menstruation specifically. And same sort of deal. They used them in combination with oral contraceptives, also the C and E together, same situation. And then they also looked at the it's the dyspareunia, which is the painful intercourse.
Okay.
Pain around before, after, during sort of phenomenon. That was also one of the analyses that they conducted. And once again, the group with combined E and C seemed to have the highest rates of pain relief.
Oh, that's
versus
fantastic.
The control. So looking at secondary outcomes, this is where we talked about
plasma,
the peripheral oxidative stress markers. So yeah, there was the plasma MDA.
Okay.
Definitely less of the studies looked at this. So there was a total of 5. 4 of them looked at vitamin E and vitamin C together, and 1 of them looked at vitamin D use and measured those corresponding plasma levels. Seemed as though the effect was greater for vitamin E and vitamin C on that in particular, because when they removed the vitamin D study from that analysis, it seemed to show a greater reduction.
Oh, fantastic.
So in general, again, the common theme looking more at the impact of E and C. And so there were some other inflammatory markers that they looked at as well. C-reactive protein, there was some reduction. There was a significant increase in total antioxidant capacity.
Okay, so whether it was just through the subjective pain markers or the direct measurement of the what did you call it again? The plasma
MDA.
Plasma MDA. In either case, it looked like supplementation with C and E was effective in reducing pain and the secondary markers for endometrial pain. What were the dosages they were using? Since we're talking about, these are not numbers that people can get just by changing their diet. This is, what is the term? Joe would say it.
These are the therapeutic doses.
Therapeutic doses. What was the therapeutic dose that they were using for this?
So they did vary a decent bit. So that's some of the issues here. So
sure.
The top end was 1,200 units of E.
Okay.
1,000 units of vitamin C, and then 50,000 units of vitamin D.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that that's what you need to take. We certainly don't generally recommend that much vitamin E. So in this case, this would definitely be something you want to, at least talk to your provider. In general, you need to.
Right.
But more or less commenting on what was used in here.
So our perfect E has 400 IU,
which is pretty standard.
So for these purposes, somebody would be looking at taking 2 to 3 to do what was done in this study, and then the vitamin C. I guess it depends on how many scoops you're doing, or if you're using the tablets or whatever. But that's easier to dose as well. But we're talking about more than just your typical multivitamin. Our daily essentials isn't going to cover it. This is specific therapeutic dose C and D. Okay. All right. That's exciting news. Anything else in there that we haven't covered that is worth going over?
There was plenty more in the meta-analysis. There was one of the studies that showed no statistically significant difference in the pregnancy rate between the supplement group and the placebo group.
Okay.
So there's just not enough here to talk about how,
it may or may not affect the
right. So reducing
ability.
the symptoms and maybe reducing some inflammatory or oxidative measures, like didn't look like there was a strong connection between that and pregnancy rates.
Okay.
So,
at the same time, in a study where they're also using hormonal birth control as one of the research groups, it's entirely possible that most of these people weren't actively trying to get pregnant. So it might not be a good indication of that.
potentially. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The point is, it seems to work. Vitamin C and vitamin E as supplementation for endometrial pain seems to work pretty well.